Okay, everybody, let's get channel 0. Time to catch up. Good evening to all of you. You guys have umbrellas. Where you look at this rain is, let's have a look-see. Yep. Not too good. My goodness. We have some major issues. A stuck system or pattern, you could say, that will continue for the next 2 months. Unbelievable. You guys do understand that all of this rain is going to be followed up by dryness, absolute dryness, absolute dryness. But I am very sensitive to those who live in areas where floods come. Hey, I have a gripe before I get started. How many of you guys eat bread? You like bread? You like toast? I'm a toast connoisseur. I am. I love toast. And so I'll say this one more time. To the bread companies, all of them, they have messed up the bread. They have messed it up. It's no longer the same. It's different. It tastes bad. It's awful. It's just awful. So, I propose I'm going to have a look-see. Because I'm a toast connoisseur, right? And so that means sometimes put nothing on the bread, just a toasted piece of bread. But I have to look into it. You know why? Because that could be dangerous for everybody, right? It's already legal to make ice cream out of plastic. That's already legal. And they don't have to let you know that either. So in these days, because of these weird laws that we have, it's important that you guys read the ingredients. So don't be surprised if you see a headline about some sort of investigation on bread, of all things. That is, by the way, the root of our diets, right? Grain, something has happened. And, instead of hiding it, needs to be uncovered. I noticed that about Folgers in the year 2003 or 4, I believe it was. They changed the formula, and I never bought that again. And they just recently reverted back to the original formula. I don't know if they can maintain that or not, but it went from coffee to pencil lead, and so I didn't want any more. I looked into that too. With new ownership, they put it back to the way it was. But bread is about to be investigated. Grains and wheat is about to be investigated. Because I am a toast connoisseur. I love bread. I do. I love bread. It's just one of those things I go to. But it's awful. Something is terribly wrong with it. And it seems like these kids today, they have no taste buds, right? In fact, I know those people. Anybody who has had sugar-free stuff, it has stripped out certain abilities of your taste buds. It has. So that's why things smell different, or they're benign in nature, meaning you don't smell them. 80% of smell is taste anyway, right? So something is wrong with that. But we do live in days where if things were collapsing, and I have to say it like this, if they were collapsing as far as food situation goes, you would not know about it. They have a legal obligation, right, I guess you could say, in their world to cover everything up. It's bad. The bread is bad, right? Bad. Somebody says, Mike, you still drinking? Yes, that's the only thing I drink, and I do that from time to time. Coffee puts me to sleep. But Maxwell House is the only thing I drink. It's the only formula that's been pretty consistent. right? Now, they have some weird types of Maxwell House. I have to stay away from that, right? And unlike most people, I will break out the chemicals and test for certain things. Right? And the bread is supposed to have a specific iron content. So that when it goes through that toasting chemical change, hint, hint, right? It's supposed to be fairly consistent. It's not supposed to have big, long streaks of some substance in there. It's not supposed to be there. And so it's awful, right? It's terrible. And it will not mix, obviously, the bread formula. When they're making that bread, it will not mix fluffy anymore. It's pretty abrasive. It's very abrasive. But I'm going to have a look-see, because I've noticed a lot of foods are changing. On labels, you see biologically engineered patties of meat. You guys know that hamburgers, when you have hamburgers, if you buy them frozen, that's not hamburger. They have leftover parts of cows. They grind everything up, kind of like sausage or hot dogs, and they put seasoning into it, mix it all together, and they add fat to it, right? The leftover fat content they add to it, and they send it through a broiler and broil it off, and then they'll package it to you guys, but it's not what you think it is, and it's been that way for years now. About 10 years ago, I used to like steaks and things like that. It's very difficult for me to eat meat these days. And if you guys work out or if you exercise, right, you become very sensitive to foods and what your body can utilize and burn up and all that good stuff. Well, certain people, restaurants, organizations, groceries, stores, and manufacturers altered their formula, and it became junk meat. In other words, no energy from it, no notable, your body can't burn it like it normally does, right? So there's some different things happening. And believe me, there's probably a motive behind it, but we'll get to that later on. We have to go step by step. It is Friday, by the way, right? I have to disregard our schedule. I do. You guys know I'm prepping. We're prepping for upgrade, and so I've been in the walls and sawing things and cutting myself up and all that good stuff. You know how it goes. You know how it goes. I love doing that stuff, by the way. I do. But I'm hoping that with this upgrade, as we combat AI, that's something else we have to work on, right, is to combat AI. In fact, I have a list in front of me of trigger words, which I often use, but the whole list is changed now, right? There are some words I can't use. There are some words I insert in there at the wrong time. There are pauses I must have. And all of these help to avert AI triggers. They are savvy these days. Savvy. Anybody who's making a website, you're going to find that out. They're very savvy and quick. They can process everybody's website in less than about an hour, and that means crawl through it and find out everything, right? So I tend to do things because I understand how it processes information, as many programmers would. But AI is becoming quite the thing here lately. I'd say about 4 months, AI will be in everything. Everything. Anything moving in about 8 to 9 months, anything moving will have onboard AI. Anything moving, right? Somebody say code words don't work. The best you can do with AI, right, is to insinuate as you're speaking. Suppose you're talking about a subject. If you throw some insinuations in your sentences, referring to something totally off topic or some descriptive word that doesn't quite match the content, it will change the subject matter of your conversation. Then it will parse that data, go back and try to extract the patterns of what you speak. Well, I can't do that if you continue to alter that. And so you have a revolving list of words you go through, right? So every day it's different. Every day is something very simple, but every day you have different insertions, different things at different times, different words you don't use in certain days, and it makes it difficult for it to find out if you're authentic or not. It makes it very difficult. Can't quite pick out your subject matter. So you have to do that. Okay. Anyway, the bread situation. Oh my. The food situation is going to take its toll. It will. It will. Let me ask you guys something. There's a phenomena happening you may not noticed. Have you guys noticed that your brain, you're thinking about one thing, but something else comes out of your mouth? Have you guys been going through this? In your daily conversations, right? You're in your mind, you're thinking of one thing, but when you begin to speak it, it's as though something cleared your mind. Anybody going through that? Okay, just in case you haven't, but it begins to happen when you start to think of a word. Say you're thinking of a word, but then something else comes out, right? And it really causes your mind to stutter. Now, if it happened to one or two people, they would say, well, that's age. You're getting older, right? When it happens to groups, always in groups, something else is taking place. I personally believe it's the magnetic shielding of the earth. I do. As it alters, people are going to have a harder time with their cognitive abilities because your body is tied to the earth. You guys know that, right? Your body is intimately tied to the earth. In fact, let me give you a different perspective of your life here on this earth. Right? First, I want to say, all of you are okay. You guys do know that, right? You guys understand that you're okay. And with Christ, you're okay. Hopefully all of you understand that. This is your Father's process. Things will change and alter in this world, and all of them are moving you closer and closer to spiritual things. You do know that. That means the physical side of you can go through a myriad of changes, but it has no bearing on your spirit. Whatever changes in your flesh is just your flesh, not your soul, okay? Not your soul. And I know that people have defined the soul, right? I'm not one of those who would do that. I will say that we're all spirits in the flesh, but you're okay with Christ. It's important that you guys understand that you're okay with Christ. That's very important. Very important, okay? Extremely important that you realize that with Christ, you are secure. It's also important that you really focus on your relationship with Christ in these days. It's very important. Okay? There are distractions everywhere. There are. Okay? But you're okay with Christ. It's very important that you focus upon Christ. Your body could go through everything. There are going to be lots of people who cannot handle the dreamlike state that will be induced by the changes in the magnetic field. That's going to be very real. In fact, it'll be, you guys remember back in 2011, that euphoric feeling of new knowledge that was pouring out all over the earth? Do you guys remember that? You don't have to deny it as though, you weren't caught up in it, because I think for the most part, many people were caught up in this Mayan issue, right? So much so, the Mayan topic lingers to this very day. And lots of people found themselves euphoric at experiences, at some of the programming that was coming out, conversations, excited about, the prospect of things actually happening. that feeling can often be a big distraction, and it can stop your soberness in its tracks. Right? It'll also cause you to, once you've ever gone through something like that, right, a large prophetic period that people have talked about with high expectations that did not take place, can cause a type depression or resistance to prophecy itself. It can. Although what you went through is purposed. Right? What you may not know is that millions of people were hurt by that. Were hurt by that. In this time that we're living in, it's all coming around again. That same euphoria, but with a twist. This time, you're going to have physical demonstration of a change that nobody is talking about right now. Nobody. See, a lot of people, they don't believe a monumental change is coming, and it's not going to be the end. I'm not talking about the end. I'm talking about a monumental change. They don't believe a monumental change is coming, right? They don't believe that the heavens that you see right now are about to change, and they will never go back to normal, not until the Lord has established his kingdom. Nobody knows how many years that will take. But the truth is, we're in motion. We're in motion. The earth is in motion. The solar system is in motion. We are traveling in a direction. This entire galaxy is moving in a direction. So that means we're in a new part of space. You guys do understand that, right? We're in a brand new part of space. If you ever look at a sphere or rotating, let's say a rotating circle or some tires, something like that, right? If a tire had an internal rotating object, it would hit familiar space as the outer ring is turning. It would hit that familiar space about a couple times. We did that. But then that tire would move into a whole new position. So everything within the tire is going to experience things in a much different way, right? Right? New temperatures, new whatever. Well, we're doing the same thing. Our galaxy is in a brand new position. We're being hurled on the outskirts of that galaxy. We're about to experience some things we've never gone through before. We don't know the makeup of all the particulates out there. I talked to you guys before. There was an exotic particle that hit the Earth whose power could not be measured. It was that powerful. Nobody knows where it came from, right? Nobody. But it was a particle that didn't make sense. Then, of course, another one hit. Nobody knew where they were coming from. Now, no doubt these same particles are going into the sun, too. But they're extremely powerful, which means they're extremely dangerous. Now, these were tiny particles. Tiny. But they were incredibly powerful. So we're headed into a place where more of these particulates are that have not been encountered before. That's one of these first-time things, right? They don't know how to measure certain things. They don't know the makeup of what we're heading into, which is, it's going to become quite obvious. They believe, I do too, it's going to change the physics of our world, and it will begin to break down barriers, right? A lot of people talk about the veil, ancient civilizations. They talk about a time that's coming. And just let me give you an echo of what one civilization said. Now, this civilization has not been wrong yet. It's not. But because it's not biblical knowledge, I'm not going to tell you who, I'll tell you what they said. As with all people, they understood a cycle, the cycle of mankind. Mankind has a cycle just like a baby from conception to birth. That baby goes through cycles. Well, guess what? So does humanity. Humanity goes through cycles. And so you understand that better. Think of it this way. When everything was destroyed, man had to start again. Somebody says, Hopi? No, not Hopi. When everything was destroyed, man had to start again. When they started again, they were spiritually advised at the beginning. They did not have to do everything on their own. This is depicted in every civilization. Right? Men were subject to spiritual guidance at that time, and they had intimate times with a guidance. Right? I'm just call it a guidance. I would say that God dispatched angelic help to people. That's what I'd say. So they were guided in doing things because they had to learn things again, right? As they built society, it is a known fact that stages are what mankind goes through, right? As they begin to build, as they begin to plant food, as they begin to harvest food, the politics of that food begins. When societies or civilization began again, 80% of the effort of everybody went into reaping and sowing crops, food. It was all about food, right? As they mastered the food situation, for example, the Romans were the ones that distributed the know-how, right, to feed the masses. That came from the Romans. Most of that knowledge came from the Romans, and everybody learned about that. But that was one part. You know that after they mastered that, then it was to dominate other places. Why? So they can have more food, right? If you're ever hungry and you get some food, the first thing you think about is, how can I make it to where I never have to starve again? That will be a pretty big concern, don't you think? Which means they had a whole new set of issues. They had different problems, right? And they were focused upon feeding their children and those around them. Well, this caused them to split society in classes. Those who work the terrible jobs, right? Those who manage what's harvested, and those who make deals to trade the harvest with other harvests. As they perfected the system, as everybody ate, a tight money system would always come into being. An exchange system had happened every single time. So they had a system of trade to trade food and clothing, but mostly food, as that was established. That was a portion of man's growth. But then the wars began. Why? Because people wanted the land of others, right? They wanted to make sure that their own people were safe and saved against starvation. So they began to fight so they could have ownership of different land masses. And people, in fact, fought against each other to have the better fields, to be better positioned so that they could survive. As war continued, weapons advanced, tactics advanced, governments were formed. Now the governments, after war, after everybody is tired of war, because it happens all the time, they begin to talk to one another in a very planned way. Negotiations. By this time, society has houses. They educate people for the sake of food and clothing and everything else, and society is moving. They continue to advance. They continue to fight. They continue to stave off starvation and other things. They continue to do this, and they grow. But all these civilizations noted the exact same process, which is amazing. All of them. All of them around the world noted the exact same process, as though mankind, as it was progressing, had trimesters, just like an infant would, just like a baby would in a mother's womb. So does humanity grow in the earth. When they get to a certain stage, nothing satisfies them. Nothing. Think about that for a second. They get to a stage where they can get anything they want. Nothing satisfies them. You guys, when you were young, and you wanted to get your first apartment, your first house, your first this, your first that, right? Your major concern was having enough resources to get the home and then get in the home and make it what you want it to be. And at that point, you would not suffer anybody else to come in and make your house what they wanted it to be. In fact, you got away from certain authoritative figures also. And you begin to forge a new path, as does everybody, right? But do you remember the hunger you had to work and to establish things? You remember that? Remember the dreams and the hopes you had? You said, well, I'm going to continue to work, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get that, and I'm going to get this. Well, after a time, when you get all that stuff, or you get burned out on trying to get it, after a time, you get tired of what you see around you. The appreciation level drops. And what normally happens with society is people fall in love with a dream or a vision. But when they actually have that dream or vision established, it does not feel like they thought it would. And so they're greatly disappointed, which leaves them empty and dissatisfied. Now they have everything, just like you. You achieved living. You achieved doing something on your own. You achieved this. But you were still dissatisfied. Right? The measure of dissatisfaction can be known by the complaints we've had all throughout the years. If a person is satisfied, they dare not complain. They have nothing to complain about. But the problem is you can get exactly what you think you need and find out it's not what you need. You can go pursue to get something you want, fall in love with the idea, and when you actually receive it, it does not feel like you thought it would feel. Isn't that correct? Come on now, stay with me on this. Well, during the latter years of humanity, every single time, the same thing happened. People talked about accomplishing this and accomplishing that in all societies, and when they accomplished it, it did not feel satisfactory. They were left empty. When they were left empty, they became bored. When you become bored, you turn on your own people. In a household, when everybody is striving to make the household survive, everybody works towards that single goal. If the household ever becomes complete, right, and if the Lord's not in your life in a strong way, you will begin to turn on each other. In other words, you start getting on each other's nerves. People begin to irritate you. You start nitpicking the tiny things. See, when you're striving for something, you're not nitpicking. You don't care what the other person does. They're contributing. And you appreciate that person for contributing, right? Suppose you're with a person who never put deodorant on, and their socks smell like blue cheese. Now, if they were all working for a goal, you could easily overlook that, right? Because they're helping you make a goal. And so because the value of achieving the dream is so much more than the repulsion of what the person is, you can easily adapt to a person like that, right? But here's the problem. Once you get what you were striving for, and it does not feel the way you thought it would feel, and you're not satisfied, you start looking at each other sideways. Start noticing everything wrong with the person. Because you're dissatisfied, have to assign blame to someone. Somebody's going to get the blame, whether it be consciously or subconsciously. You'll start to point to people and think that they're the problem of your dissatisfaction. Right now in your lives, right now, how many people are completely 100% satisfied, honestly? How many? I'll tell you something before you answer. If I'm not careful to pray and to keep my mind upon the Lord, I would be dissatisfied. I can tell you that right now. The only reason I'm satisfied is because my eyes are upon the Lord. That's it. See, because a person who is satisfied never complains. You hear me? They never complain. How many people complained in the last year? Well, that disqualifies everybody because in truth, everybody complained within the last year. See, if a person is satisfied, they do not complain, nor can anybody make them complain because they're satisfied. You don't care what anybody does when you're satisfied. You don't care. You become totally passive about these external events because you are complete. Once you're complete, nothing can penetrate that completeness. But the truth is, we do have some dissatisfaction within us. See, it was last week. Just last week, before anybody, says, oh, no, I'm satisfied, then guess what? If you're satisfied, you would only thank the Lord. You would need nothing from the Lord. If you're satisfied, you'd forgive everybody. There'd be nothing. Nobody in this world could ever offend you. So let's go ahead and face the truth, shall we? We thought life would be one way. We thought life would be one way. We thought we'd get to a specific stage, and it would be one way. How many people look around and you see that at least 50% of what you were pursuing was pointless? That's a sign of wisdom. When you look around and you admit, my pursuance in life was greatly flawed, that's a sign of wisdom. Right? But we did the same thing. We got to a certain point. We were dissatisfied. And because we were dissatisfied, we became a little grumpy. As we were grumpy, we started looking at other people, saying, you know what? It's because of them. That's why we're in this state. Look at politics. Don't they do that? They do that in politics. They'll always say, well, it's because of them. That's why we're like the way we are. I'll tell you something. I've been in some hostile places. I have. And I've learned something. You control your environment. You can permit or not permit someone's sentiments to come in and spoil your environment, but you control your environment. You determine what your day is going to be. You do that by your acceptance of what you're hearing externally. Anyway, as people are dissatisfied, hostilities rise. The hostilities make it worse, but they also said something else. They said during these times, people would defect from what they were a part of. They would. In other words, there'd be a period when people would run away from what they were once joined with. At that same time, they said, right, the children would be strangers in their own families, that fathers would not know their sons. They wouldn't know them. That's what they said. They would know their sons. That daughters would rule over their mothers. That's what they said. Sound familiar? Anybody? How can all these civilizations have that right? Because they understood the process of both birth and the process of the progressive state of mankind. They understood the generations mankind goes through with. They did. They also said a time would come when they would disregard what they naturally were and they would become what they're not. They also said that men would become like women and women like men. It would get so bad that children would be born male, but look like a female with all male qualities in the mind of a male, but they would look like females. And that women would be born to look like males. And that would happen due to the perversion of society. All of them said this. They talked about man's technology that they would have again. See, because we've lost the history. We've lost our own history. We think we're doing this for the first time. And you want to know something that will just ruin a lot of secrets. One of the biggest secrets in the world is that they're hiding the fact that we've been here before. That's one of the biggest secrets in the world. You don't have to believe me now. You'll see it with your own eyes. They're not going to care to tell you about that. You'll see it. We've been here before. With all this, we've done all this before. All of it. The only thing that we have that they did not is a story. You know what that story is? They didn't have this story back then. We have the story. You know what that story is about? The coming of a Messiah. They never had that. They never had a coming of a Messiah. They've had a lot of attempts. Nobody ever finished the act. Nobody did. We're the only ones that have a Messiah, but actually fulfilled the Messiah's role. We're the only ones. Those back in the day, they lived among things. We don't have that either. Not that we know it. See, back then, they knowingly operated with, we could call them Nephilim in the earth. They knowingly operated that way. But all this stuff that we utilize, right? All these things, we think the first time that somebody did this and the first time somebody did that. No, it isn't. I was looking at some documents at the beginning of the year. And the same documents I revisited, because the first time I saw them was in 94, and it was talking about the atom. But it was talking about the Greeks who spoke about the atom and the forces of the atom and the electrons and protons and neutrons. No wonder they burnt the Greek library twice. For power, right? They can't give people access to a library like that. When certain groups came to America, the one thing they declared was they had to control the information. They had to control the information. And they're doing it quite well. Because if you knew, some people do know for a fact, this has all been here before. But even for them, it's very difficult for them to accept some of the antics of humanity this day. Very difficult. They're doing the same things over and over again. Let me continue. They talked about men communicating with each other from one side of the world to the other. You know, there's a mystery about old maps. Have you guys ever seen these old maps around? You guys ever seen that? Right? I know that people argue about the dates of the earth. And they say, well, you know, the earth is only 7,000 years old or something like that, right? Now, I like to read within the context of the word. Right? I do. So I know what the Lord said in the beginning. He said the earth was void and formless and cloaked in mass darkness. Then I went and, you look up those words. You know what that means? The earth had no order. The earth was, but it had no order. I think that people, when they read that statement, a day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years as a day, they don't know that's a cancellation of time. If one day equals 1,000 years, right, and 1,000 years equals one day, then one day of creation is not 1,000 years. Do you see that? Because it's a cancellation. It means time does not exist to our Father. That's what it does not mean. 1,000 years is one. It said a day, listen to me, a day is as 1,000 years. Now, and 1,000 years is as a day. See, everybody likes that day as 1,000 years, and so that's what they use. And they say, well, creation took 7,000 years. But they forgot about the other half. 1,000 years as a day. Right? But what does that mean? That's a cancellation. If 1,000 years can be a day, and a day can be 1,000 years, right? Then think of it this way. The Father said he knows, it is said that the Father knows the very count of the hairs on your head. Go and research the change of the count of the hairs on your head every hour. If the Father knows the count of the hairs on your head, then that literally means he can inspect to count your hair over and over again for 1,000 years in whatever time interval he desires. So, for example, suppose you're sitting there right now, you're listening to me, and the Lord inspects you, right? He inspects you. So you're not moving, but time is still going for us. To the Lord, 1 second. 1 second of time, of our time, right? Just 1 second. Let's suppose that was 400 years that God took to inspect you. Think about that. When everybody missed the day giveaway. See, in the Bible, it tells you what time is for. Oops. I don't know why that skipped. It tells you what time is for. One of the issues is that, and in all seriousness, right? Because maybe I don't have a good memory like most people, but only after I read the entirety of the Bible a few times were these things truly open up to me. That's when you're reading Genesis and you remember Proverbs or Psalms or something like that. And then you start to remember what God said. Time is for mankind. God exists outside of time. It's in the Word. There were moments in the Word where people were sent out and they came back and they didn't recognize the people. They said, well, who are you? Because the people were old. And they said, well, son, we sent you out 60 years ago. They come back a little kid. They were sent out to the field to go retrieve some things. Right? God is not governed by time. Time is made for us, and he told us why. That we may reflect, that we may consider the things of our lives, that we may see the truth. Time is a luxury. Time is a blessing. That's what time is. Time is a true blessing that we may reflect, that we may look on our ways to think about all the things that we're doing and purge ourselves and refine ourselves so that we can make a better step the next time. We have a lot of missteps in life. If time were not a blessing, nobody would be able to correct themselves. Time is given to us for a reason. Even the Lord said, God is not slack, as men count slackness, but he's long-suffering to usward. Right? You know what that means? That literally means everything is on schedule. It just simply means God is in complete command of that schedule. And that schedule is intimately tied to you. It's very important to remember. That schedule is timed to you. In fact, don't forget this one, right? That all of what you see is for your story. All of what's happening is for your story. Satan will have you believe it 1,000 different ways. Nope. Everything that's happening is your story. It's for you. It's for your story. Anyway. So when we go back to Genesis and people are doing carbon dating, of course they have a new dating technique out, but when they're doing this carbon dating stuff and all this, it's irrelevant. It really is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because we deal with today. And what happened in the past should be established as such. But the timing intervals become highly irrelevant. How do we know this? Because people have gotten the timing element. And what have they saved from knowing that? Nothing. Not a thing. It is said that if you don't know history, you repeat history. So I ask you this, why does history continue to be repeated? If I knew that back in the past, somebody rode a train and they burned up on the train, how's that going to help me? See, the truth is, people come up with clever sayings, true enough, and they apply maybe 14% of the time. They don't apply to everything. We catch on to these phrases, not thinking about their application. And then we use them as though we trust them, not knowing how to apply them. They haven't helped anybody. Why? Because you're in God's process. You're not in man's process. You're in God's process. It does not matter if you know history or not. See, that's a contradiction, isn't it? If this is God's process, then how can the wisdom of men perpetuate all life? They can't do that. God does that. You see? That nullifies the wisdom of mankind. And no wonder in the Word of God, it says that the smartest of mankind is but foolishness to the living God. And it's not working for them either. Take a look at the smart people. Look what they have done. Look how free we are. Everybody on earth is eating. We have fresh air, free water. We don't pay for electricity. We don't use money because that's barbaric. To compete to have the things that God supplied for us, that's barbaric. We're still running around trying to save trees. We haven't figured out that all life on earth has passed away more than a few times, and it grew back all by itself without our help. We haven't come to that conclusion yet, right? That large portions of the earth blew up in oil and everything else came out. Like the Gulf spill. Think about that, the Gulf spill. We panicked over that, right? But if you read in your history books, if you study about geology, then you understand that oil on the surface of the earth and in the water is an important process for life. We forget about those things, don't we? We do. And when you don't know them, they can be weaponized. They can be fear tactics. And you'll start campaigning for something you don't have the complete and sober picture of. Volcanism. Volcanoes right now are putting out more carbon every minute than we put out every 100 years. Isn't that funny? And they're going off like mad. It's just being dumped in the atmosphere. And according to the charts that they have put up, the Earth should be gone by now. Because they said if we reach a certain point, there would be no Earth. Because the volcanoes have put out that carbon already. So what is the big deal about? Isn't that something? I'm just changing your perspective to broaden it a bit so that you're not stuck in this one paradigm. Right? How do you see more? You take a step back. Actually believe your Father's words, but take a step back and look at it for what it is. Somebody can tell you about a bee, a bumblebee, and they can have you frightened to pieces. In fact, there are people out there frightened of bumblebees. How many people are scared of bumblebees? How many people are terrified of bumblebees? Because they're big and they're loud, and they don't know where they're going sometimes, right? They'll bump right into you. And you don't want to get stung by one of those, but do you understand the true nature of a bumblebee? If you're scared of a bumblebee and they ever come at you, hold your hand up and spread your fingers. That's all you do. Watch what happens. You want to see a bumblebee turn around and fly away real fast? Hold your hand up and spread your fingers. Then I want you to go look up, how do bumblebees sting? Why would they sting? Why would you ever do that? Because when you're frightened of something, it's because you're imagining what it can do. You don't know what it can do. Many people have imagined what insects and all these unknown things can do. They have no idea what it can and cannot do. When you learn of what it can and cannot do, now you're sober. Until you do that, you're not sober. You're operating by imagination. If you hold your hand up and spread your fingers, that bumblebee will see a whole fleet of bumblebees. And he's gone. It's the funniest thing you ever saw in your life. You hold your hand up, it's like a stop sign to them. They won't go past it. They see it everywhere, and then they eventually take off. They do. And never be afraid of any bee. When the temperatures, when it's in the shade, and the temperatures, right, are below about 68 degrees, do you know why? Because bees can't sting. Haven't you ever noticed a bee just walling around? Right? They're kind of slow. They're not flapping the wings. They can't do anything. They're not warmed up yet. But as soon as they hit the sunlight, you might want to, get away. That's how they operate. So when you learn about something, it takes the fear away. That's when you're wise about something, right? If you knew when something could bite you and when it could not, it would change your life. That's why you educate yourself, not perpetuating stories of the imagination. Anyway, the progress of mankind gets up to a time, right, when they're so dissatisfied with everything, they begin to fight each other and riot against each other. Protests. We call it protesting, right? They called it rioting against every subject. That's what the ancients said. They rioted against every subject. Think about that. And then listen to me carefully, after they rioted against every subject, guess who they pointed at? Their leaders. They went to go get the leaders. You know what that means? If that history is accurate, and if it's repeating itself right now, then we're going to see lots of riots about everything. Any and everything that people are convinced that whether it be just or unjust, it doesn't matter. All people have to do is gravitate towards a cause. After they get burned out on that, they're going to seek the lives of their leaders. They're going to fulfill a bloodlust. But here's the worst part about it. In every single culture, now all these cultures vanished. Where'd they go? They're gone. The survivors, the races that exist today, they have a story of why they exist today, and it is not a good story. You see, because all of them resurfaced. A small troop or group of people resurfaced after a long period of being tucked away. They were the only ones of their kind that made it. Everybody else perished. What killed them? What took them away? What killed them like that? Why is it that only those, in Noah's case, that were in a boat survived? But see, there were other times after Noah. Everything was lost again. What happened to the people? What happened to these people who knew how to stack, 80-ton stones, granite, cut them perfectly, where you can't put a razor between them? What happened to them? Where'd they go? They were so wise and smart, so skilled, so well-versed. What happened to them? I'll tell you what happened. Something overcame them. Something even fooled them into believing that somehow they can make it through. Something perplexed them enough to cause them to believe that the threat they were perceiving was no threat. Something caused them to continue in life as usual, and that was a mistake. When they should have taken shelter, they did not. Something convinced them there was no need to take shelter. How do we know this? They're the ones that dug it up. The archaeology. Everything. People were eating. There were ceremonies happening. There are time capsules from a very hot and bad time on the earth, and it seems to come in seasons, very long seasons. When I say seasons, I mean calculatable intervals. Do you hear me? And in fact, after they turned on their leaders, that's when they began to behold it. How it formed was this. First, there were spiritual changes everywhere. People began to see creatures that never existed before, creatures that existed before their time. People began to see weird things into different moments of time. Objects that were disconnected. For example, suppose lightning strikes, but the lightning gets stuck in the sky. And it just stays there for an hour or so. That's impossible, right? People talked about rocks began to float and sing at the same time. That's recreatable in physics, by the way. They already know what that is, and it scares people to pieces. Yes, that means real rocks will float. It also means rocks will make this sound. And what was happening? What was happening? When people perceived all these different things, I believe some was spiritual, but I think the major part was an alteration of the magnetic field of the earth. See, because if the magnetic field changes, so does your perception. Do you hear me? That means your eyes are not limited. That means you're not going to be able to determine whether you're in a dream or if you're awake. I don't know about you, but that could be horrifying. They did echo the sentiment that people were dreaming while interacting with people, and they could not escape the dream. Can you imagine? Listen, first of all, can you imagine you start dreaming, but you never fell asleep? And you're hollering at everybody around you because you can't see them. You see a different scenery. They don't know what you see, but you're seeing something else. You're caught between a dream and reality, and you're crying out for help, and nobody can help you. Nobody can help you. And the dream does not stop. Think about that. Think. Which means a time would come when nobody can help another person. You know, there's a toxin that does that. There's a toxin that can put you in a dream state, and you're wide awake, but you can't see anything out of your eyes, though you will swear up and down. You see everything and hear everything in a different realm, and it's all because of a toxin. You know those things that come up from the bottomless pit? They don't kill anybody, but they do sting men, like the sting of a scorpion, like the sting of a scorpion. And they torment men. And it says in those days men will seek death but will not find it. What could cause a person to be alive? A hardened person who will not believe in the Lord. A hardened person who rejects everything anybody would ever come to them with. You can't be a weakling and stand in that time like these rebellious ones will stand. What could cause them to just want to die, but they won't be able to? I'm just saying if somebody were trapped in a dream state, they wouldn't be able to navigate anything. They could feel everything in the real world, but they wouldn't be able to navigate anything because what they're seeing is a dream. Suppose it's a nightmare. All of us, most of us, have had some type of nightmare, and we were thanking God that we woke up from it. Right? Imagine if there was no waking up. You can't eat. You cannot drink because you're stuck in a perpetual nightmare with no escape. Wouldn't that drive a person crazy? Think about that. They wouldn't be able to go home. They can't get comfortable. They can't get out of the elements. They can't see where they're going. Think about that. That would be horrifying, wouldn't it? That would be absolutely horrifying. But that's a fate waiting for them. That's just one example of something very, very real. After all these weird things happen to people, everybody abandoned everybody all of a sudden. Nothing mattered in life. The heavens changed, and they always described it and said that God will... Here's how bad it was. When the heavens changed, they described a myriad of things, but the one thing persistently they talked about was they said this thing that was neither a star nor a planet nor any celestial body, but it was a blackness that looked back at you, but had tentacles that came out of it that always moved. It always moved. It touched the surface of the earth. It caused fumes to come up from the earth that would burn a person's lungs, but it wouldn't kill them. It would just burn their lungs. The way they described it was a living thing. Living thing. They described many more things, but they did say this, that in those days, to seek the one true God and abandon everything else. Now, how can the Mayans, why won't they tell people that that's what the Mayans left everybody with and stop digging up all this rock work? You know what the Mayans said? Forget about all the other gods you think are out there. That's what they said. Imagine that. What could cause a civilization like the Mayans say something like that? What could cause the Egyptians to say something like, do you not know that they canned all their gods? Egypt canned all those Dothan, all those figures. They said, no, forget them. Oh, no. And then they said the one thing that echoed throughout all of them. They said, forsake earthly goods and save your souls, is what they said. Those are secrets they keep. Those are big secrets in the earth. You know that. They don't want people to know that these people abandoned their own deities. Then after it was passed, guess what they did? They put up charts everywhere in many different languages. You go into any of these ruins and you see the iconography of the bull. Do you know that? The bull is a sign in the heavens. They're talking about constellations. They even left a narrative to tell every generation about these seasons because it's coming back. They were so concerned about their offspring. They were incredibly concerned about their offspring, and they said someone's got to pass this knowledge on. That they built monuments, calendars, just for that. They even wrote that in their time, they misinterpreted what was left behind for them. They realized what everything was when it was too late. You know, in the Bible it tells us that there are men on this earth that know the truth, but they won't tell a soul. Do you know that? It says that in the Bible. There's something very real in the makings. You're in a time that's extremely real. And through the tracking, listen to me, all you have to do is look at your fellow man. Look at what your fellow man is doing. They are part of the calendar. They are. As a believer in Christ and the Father and his ways and his word wholeheartedly, God has given us a definitive warning about what he will do yet again. He did it before. He's going to do it again. And he wants us in position prior to that time. And he does not want us immersed in the world when that happens. When I say immersed in the world, here's what I mean. Imagine you're in the middle of a protest at the time when you need to be building up your spiritual resolve. While you should be preparing and fasting and praying, you're wrapped up in world affairs. See, the Lord is doing something that a lot of people probably can't understand. I've noticed he's broken a lot of his people away from global affairs. I've noticed that. Why would he do that all at the same time? He's taking his people out of all these things in the world. I've noticed that. Because I've noticed those who truly believe in Christ, they've been taken out of the heart of a very dark system. They've been taken out. Now they know about it, but they've been taken out. When a person has ego and pride, do they seek to go back in so they can still be somebody among men? It's almost like God is giving them choice. And here we are in this day and age where things are accelerating with men. You're going to know what that calendar was. Look at your fellow man. Why is the entire world changing all at the same time? We don't have one country over here who's settled and a country over here who's settled, then a nutball country. That's not what we have anymore. Everybody is sharing the same sentiment. These protests, right? It does not matter how many operatives come to a country. If the people are of a sober mind and the people take care of their household, they're not going to join in with a protest that will tear down their own household, will they? But let me ask you this. Of all the times in history, see, because these type protests, it's not the first time we've had them. Here's the difference, though. In times past, they can never get traction. They can never do that. They would come to the U.S. and start talking about this stuff, and people would say, oh, no. This is our country. Right? You got to go back to your house and solve your issues. You can't bring that with us. People would not tolerate that. America had its own issues, but America would not tolerate a foreign interest to come into this country and start talking about this country. That would be like you allowing someone to come into your house and degrade your entire family, and you're allowing it. No, that's crazy. But it's not just happening. See, let me refresh your memories. You guys remember Egypt when that guy set himself on fire in the Middle East? That's where it all began. You remember that? He set himself on fire in the Middle East, and not a week later, things erupted in Egypt. Do you guys remember that? Not only that, but it happened again. Not only that, but it happened again. Do you know what happened in China too? And every single place it happened, the same pattern of events took place. The same pattern of events. You know, in witchcraft, in high witchcraft, when somebody sets themselves on fire, it's part of a ritual, right? So they go out, and you'll have these people, listen to me carefully, you'll have these people murder and take these certain organs of certain people, right? At the end of that ritual, somebody will go out and set themselves on fire, and it doesn't even matter if they die. It only matters if their flesh burns. It's part of a ritual to release demons into society. Once those demons are released, they're part of a legion, which means those demons operate in a similar fashion. Well, in every single country in which this has happened, there have been large groups that operated on one accord. Out of nowhere, people agreed to these corrupt causes. Out of nowhere. Now, here in America, what do we see? We see people coordinated, agreeing with those who would come into this country to speak against this country. And we see Americans agreeing with them. Now, I don't know about you. To get a person to agree with a cause like that, something internal is happening. Something internal. A change of mind. A change of spirit. Now remember, this ritual unleashes a legion of demons that operate. Just think of them as cloned. It's a bunch of cloned demons that do the exact same thing, just like these people are doing the exact same thing all over the USA. How did it spread so fast all over the USA? The thing that got my attention was not the protest. It was the coordinated activities within the protests. It was the agreement, the coordinated agreement of too many people in these protests. The protests did not bother me. It's the repetitious responses of people. Have you guys been listening to what these students have been saying? I promise you, it's almost like they're reading a script. You can listen to one at one university who speaks passionately, and then you hear another one somewhere else, not even associated with the first one, who speaks the exact same thing. Now, I don't know about you, but you find that activity a lot with spirits. For example, there are people in your lives, all of you have somebody in your lives that has pointed at you, said something against you. You didn't share it with a soul. You probably have not to this day. You thought that getting rid of that person would get rid of that headache for you, but then you turn around and a total different person speaks the exact same words as the other person. And neither one of them know each other. Normally there's an accusation. Normally there's some dark saying, some blackmail, something to that nature. And you have one person in one area of your life you get rid of, and then somebody else pops up that does not know the first, and they say the exact same phrase. That's spiritual. You can get rid of the people all you want. That spirit is going to continue to operate through people. That's how you know. Because they'll replicate, they say the same thing throughout the years. In fact, they say them so much that if you open up your ears and listen, you'll be able to hear many different statements from many different spirits, and they say the same thing every single time. And if you ever memorize them, you'll be able to know if a spirit is saying it or if a person is saying it. Because they say the exact same thing. It's as though they're not allowed to change what they say. Let me ask you something. Why are these students doing the exact same thing? And why did the students, there were a dozen students that said the same thing a terrorist said. That was an ISIS member. And that was about 5 years ago. How is that possible? How is it possible? See, something is happening here. The process has started. Not too many will see it. The consequences are going to be costly. They're also planning something. You don't have to believe that. There's a method to their madness, and they're planning something. Well, they're having these protests because I told you, listen, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm trying to give a small warning within this conversation. I'll take a break, but I told you guys about that dream, about that tablet. It had plans on it. It had plans on it. It had multiple plans on it, and they were going to distract the people. I told you guys that because I was trying to tell you what I was saying on that tablet while it was still fresh. Because everything in me said that's going to take place. That wasn't too long after that. The ship ran into the bridge. Other things happened to them. I'm not saying that the dream came to pass. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I can't discount that. And if what I saw on that tablet is real, these protests are a distraction from something very serious that will take place. Now, I hate to put it that way, but that's just the way it is. These protests and distraction from coordinated events that are going to take place, and they're not going to find them. They regarded them too late. Be back in a minute right here at COT. Okay, everybody, I'm back again. Let's get Zero back in there. Don't want to leave them out. Wait, guys, is channel 0 clear? Is it clear? Let me know if it is or not, if it's clear. I know it's going to clear up in time, but is it clear? And listen, I know I sound like I know how crazy it sounds. I do. But I'll tell you something. Conviction, well, when you're hit with that type conviction, if your Father in heaven ever showed you something that every fiber in you convinced was true, you would be true to what he showed you. Right? You would be. It's almost like you can't deny it in any way. You know what the sad part is? I'm not going to feel good if it takes place. I want to feel awful if it takes place. That happens. That's what you're not vindicated, right? And of course you sound nuts. But keep this in mind. If a person read the book of Revelation and they believed in what they read, why would they sit there and do nothing? Why would a person do absolutely nothing if they believe in what they're reading? When people, see, I'm not one of those people who's not going to act on my beliefs. I can't do that. That is the highest of phony baloney. Right? I just can't do that. I believe in the Word of God. I do. And I happen to act on things because I believe. Many people know they say they believe, that the end is coming. But most of the folks who say they believe the end is coming, they're doing absolutely nothing to prepare for the end. I'm not that person. Not that one. I don't think that's I never take the safe way out, right? You know how when you have something on the back burner, well, just in case what was shown to me was bogus, I'm going to leave myself an exit. I don't do that. Why would I even talk to you guys if I did that? I'm not going to do that. So if I have to end up being the fool, I'd rather be that than to be a bigger fool if it took place, having been irresponsible with something true given to me. I don't want to do that. At any rate, back to the progressive state of mankind and all these civilizations and their common sentiment toward the end. It scared them. It scared them so bad that it's also documented that people devoted the rest of their lives into warning future generations in every way they could. Certain kings survived and demanded things be built with the hope that someday people would figure it out and so that they would be warned. It is a blessing to have a document like the Bible. It is a blessing. A long time ago, they used to pass down stories by songs. That's how they kept things. They didn't so much write it down on, pen and ink or something like that, but they kept it by songs and traditions. Now, we look upon those things today like the Greek pantheon. People look upon the Greek pantheon, and they have made lots of stories with it, and you've had experts come along and give their opinion. It just so happens that the Greek pantheon at one stage is totally different than what it was at its beginning stage. And a lot of people just simply ignore that. It's also known of these key archaeologists that happened because they wanted people to understand the motions and movements of what they call the spheres, the planets. Because they said something else. That when this season comes about, the planets abandon their orbits. The same thing our Father said. Same thing. If the planets abandon their orbit, right? If they start shifting, moving around, possibly things going retrograde that are not supposed to, we know that something significant has happened to the order of our solar system because of an external force. Can you imagine? See, they said the earth is going to reel and reel to and fro like a drunkard. Now, just think about something. A person on the earth would not feel that. What you would see are the stars in the skies at quick pace moving in directions and ending up in locations they shouldn't be at. But again, the best calendar is your fellow man. And in this case, with the Bible, there's a focal point on Israel. A focal point. We live in a time where it's very difficult. Very difficult. With all the information around, you would think that we can narrow down all this information, right? It's very difficult Because the men who hold the truth in a vault, they won't share it. If they did share it, right, they'd have to explain why they didn't share it before. And because of the people's temperament, that would mean instant death. That is my firm belief. That based on what the Bible says, right? Based on what these ancient civilizations wrote, that's precisely what eventually took place. You know what that is? That you will learn a truth. You're going to start learning things that's going to make you angry at those who have been in command of your life, who have lied to you for a long time. Now, they won't be alive, but it's not going to excuse any leader who's in power at that moment. For example, suppose you learned that the government has always known about other people here on this planet. Suppose you learned that they have doctored everything you ever saw about the earth so that they could obscure certain locations. Just a few locations, not everything, but a few. And suppose you learn that some of these anomalies that many of you have been seeing as of late, in fact, not anomalies. You saw the proof, but the proof was a bit too simple to accept for anything significant. For example, large dark areas in the ocean. Anomalistic things. You guys remember a few months ago, I mentioned arcs. You guys remember that? Call me crazy. You can call me crazy all day. But I mentioned arcs. Waking up. You guys remember that? In the oceans. Long before any anomalies popped up. You remember that? That slowly over time. In fact, in that same archive, if it's recorded somewhere, I told you what people would see. And people saw it. Rantings of a crazy person. I believe people are going to begin to learn that they could have lived a different life. They could have been a bit more serious about spiritual things had they known the truth. And that's going to cause a lot of anger. See, the Bible tells us that a day is coming. No one will deny that God is real. All these ancient civilizations echoed one single statement. They said, in those days men will know that God is not a dream. God's plural, that God is not a dream. They encouraged those same ancients from all these civilizations, encouraged everyone to abandon everything but the one true God. That only he is just and full of judgment. See, they caught the truth at the last minute. And according to the Word of God, men will hide themselves. What will they say to themselves? Why will they go into hiding in the first place? Because they'll say, hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? How did they know in the first place? Because they do know. Because they do have an understanding. Oh, they know. They're just not telling anybody. They know. But they're not telling a soul. Look at that scripture again. They had knowledge of it. They knew exactly what it was, and so they went and hid themselves. They could interpret the signs and what was happening on the earth. They knew exactly what they were. And they went and hid themselves because they knew it was over. They knew what his powers were. They knew it was real, so much so they hid themselves. Think about that. Oh, so they know, but they're not sharing it with the populace. Why? Because of they're bowing to Satan, because of their fear. What they call the God of the earth. Satan himself, the king of the world. It's what some of these people have to go see. If they choose to commit to leadership for another duration of time, it could possibly explain how a person can look normal, but then upon their second term, they go gray. And they start losing certain abilities and willpower. And they don't mind to play the game. It's how a normal person can become corrupt. Maybe that explains the blank look on all their faces upon accepting a second term. The shock. Maybe that's why the ones who spoke against it, all of them died. They never wrote a book about it. They never got a chance. Those who truly stood against it spoke no more. But we're not talking about aliens. No. We're talking about the very element our Father speaks of. If somebody knows what they're really talking about concerning that, then they also know there have been people who have been turned gray right before their faces. Can you imagine a person aging about 20, 30 years within a minute right before your face? That sounds impossible, right? If a person really knew what they were talking about, they'd have that story. Think of it as kind of a prideful demonstration. Somebody goes through that every single time they have a demonstration. Well, the progress of mankind, one of the focal points as they progress through these stages, we all know what happens at the end. Right? We all know what happened to those civilizations. Here's the question, though. Why all the changes that they spoke of? Why are they happening right now with mankind? Why is mankind changing at the same time geology is changing? Why is everything happening all at one time? All the problems are happening at one time. How can we have a money problem? Have you guys ever thought about finances? You know, it's kind of like the law. Let me explain something to you guys, right? It's kind of like the law. Look at Donald Trump is in court, right? He's in court. And what is the charge? A fraudulent campaign, right? Which is that's a federal charge. But they dropped that federal charge. They never saw that they could charge him with them. So New York picks up a charge connected with this business. And you can go to jail over your business practices in New York. Right? So what they're trying to say, most people don't even know what this trial is about. It's a real trial, real charges. He's not guilty yet, of course. Because I'll tell you why. Do you guys remember at the town hall meeting when one of the guys from CNN had asked President Trump about the audio recording, and President Trump was very sincere. He said, he said he was embarrassed. It was locker room talk is what he said. Now listen to me. And what he meant by locker room talk is it was guy talk, right? But see, the facts, they kept coming out. They did. Now, he may be who he is, right? But here's the truth of it. Can anybody name any rich person who has not had locker room talk? You can't. The truth be told, you cannot. But Trump admitted that in a town hall before he was elected. That yes. See, because one of the defenses is this, that he was trying to get that story crushed prior to anything coming out, right? That would make him look bad for the election. Here's the problem. It already came out. He was not president. It came out in the town hall meeting. And Trump said that he apologized. It was embarrassing to his family. You know, he was very sincere about that, right? So here's what I'm telling you about this case. What is driving this case? What's driving the actual case is you have one side that hates the other, and the other side that hates the side persecuting. That's what you see. Is it going to end? I'm telling you it's not. It's also drawing everybody's attention to this trial, of which probably only 40% truly understand what the trial is about. Every single time some trial like this has taken place where it captivated America, America was altered. Do you hear me? America was altered. And every single time America's altered, foreign powers grow even more. Do you hear me? So I want you guys to be careful in something. Start to admit the truth and start to hang in the truth. Here's a fact. How many people know Trump personally? Type of one if you know him personally. Just type of one. If you know him personally. Type of one if you know Joe Biden personally. Type of one. You know what the fact is? Most do not know him personally. They don't know the lawyers personally. And it's important right now at this time that we not operate by hearsays. You know who hates a talebearer? Your Father in heaven does. It's in Proverbs. You know who hates a backbiter? Your Father in heaven does. See, when you don't know absolutely what's happening, you're taking a risk supporting somebody else's opinion. Because here's what's at stake. Your eternal life and everybody connected to you. You could curse yourself through this trial. You could curse yourself through Joe Biden's presidency. That's by God's word. For a long time, people have said things, did things without instant consequence. That time is almost up. The time where a person can say just anything they want and still continue on to the next day. That time is almost up. And if you're in a habit or a practice of believing nothing can take place, there's prophecy about that too, because in the Bible it says that men would begin to say God will not do good nor evil. You know what that means? That's a phrase which means God will not interfere with these affairs of men. You won't die because of what you say. God's not going to do anything because of what you say. That time is almost to an end. In the Bible it says people will fall because of that. Those who are in the system. They're also prey to the system. You know that. You can fall. Many of us have been in the system. The system is not kind. It will steamroll you in a heartbeat and have everybody turn against you if it can. Don't be one of those people. Most importantly, don't operate by somebody else's truth. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourselves. You're going to have people running around in the world. I don't know why these things are happening. Because they're cursed. Because they will not stop persecuting. And do you not know that anybody who persecutes in this time is going to be persecuted? You don't have to do that. If you think somebody is bad and has gotten away with something, you're not in alignment with the Word of God. The Lord said, vengeance is mine. This is life or death I'm speaking, your life and your death. Many of you want to protect your families. Don't curse your family. Let the Lord handle it. His outcome will happen. He has people in position who will do what they do. You have a powerful weapon. Prayer. But see, here's a problem. There are a lot of people who say they believe in Christ, but they believe that prayer is useless. Somehow before the absolute pain. Because if you're thinking, okay, I'll get everything right when I start to see things. I'm sure they thought that in the days of Noah. I'm sure they said that in Egypt. Do you not know that everybody who doubted and everybody who did not follow by the instruction of the living God perished due to their lack of faith? Do you know that the Lord said in the book of Revelation, he who kills with the sword must be killed by the sword too? Those who lead into captivity, must they themselves? Or those who lead into captivity must go into captivity? There's a hatred rising. In your patience possess ye your souls. Don't allow the hatred to enter into you. Your royalty. You're secured in Christ. Don't jeopardize it now. Don't do it. Why do we always say we believe in the Lord, yet we believe he'll do nothing here on this earth? That's a problem. But this is the last thing I want to say. Because our Father discloses to us that in these last days, many will fall away. Hear me on this. They're going to fall away. And when you look in the Bible at how people fall away, they began to go back into the world in one form or another. If I were to go into the world right now and be a part of the persecutors or the vindicators of these worldly things, do you not know that's me entering back into the world again? How many of you have had the warning? Let me tell you about the warning dream you received. Now, one of you has written me about this, so I'm going to tell you anyway. You had a dream that you went back to an old job. But in that old job, you were like, yes, this is my old job. But when you went back to the old job in your dream, things were different and it didn't work out. It was nothing like it used to be. And you were lost in the sauce. And when you woke up, you said, whew, I'm glad I'm not back there. I can't go back there again. How many had that dream? How many of you did God show you going back to your some old job that you had, but it wasn't like what it used to be? And when you woke up, you said, well, I can't go back. Thank God I'm not going back there. You know what he was showing you? Do you know what he was showing you? That if you go back now, you're going to be lost. There's no coming out of it. That's what he was showing you. If you go backward now, you're going to be Lot's wife. You're not coming back out. This is it. And it's so incredibly sad that there are many who will not heed the warning. Not my warning. The one your Father has given you directly. The one only you know about that I just mentioned. Somehow, we can't forget all of what the Lord has sown into us. Somehow you can't be baited back into this world system again because it's not what it appears to be. Things are not what they appear to be. They're not. You were shown of a trap. And it looked so innocent, so familiar. But when you got into it, you found out otherwise. And no, you guys didn't write me about it. Nobody ever writes about when the Lord shows them that. If you're asking how I knew, that was just now inspired. I don't know anything. If you had a microphone, the Lord would use you from time to time, but you better believe a collective warning has gone out and a spiritual stir has been implemented because a shaking is coming. Everything is going to be shaken. But the Lord will always be the victory for those who believe in him. To believe in the Lord is to believe in his gospel. It's that simple. Here's a question. Do you actually believe what Jesus spoke without modifications? Do you believe in what Jesus spoke? Do you believe that you should love your enemy? Why is that so hard for people to accept? I tell you this, for the people who cannot accept that, you know what the Lord said? Do you guys realize what the Lord was talking to somebody in the Bible? And they said, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Jesus said, unless you become like one of these little ones, you will in no wise enter into the kingdom of God. Let me translate that for you. He said, don't even think about who's going to be greatest. You're not going to make it in until you become like these little children. And what is the quality of a little child? Children have been known to bicker and be best friends 5 minutes later. Children depend upon their parents. don't they? Children don't stray far. They do weird things, but they truly love those who take care of them. Do you know a child will always love the one who truly loves them? Do you know that? They'll always do that. Children don't betray the one who really loves them. Do you know that? You can tell a child, come on, let's go. And if you love them and they love you, they're going to say, okay. When a child does not love you, and we don't really love them, you'll say, let's go, and they'll say, why? Question everything about you. When they question someone, they always say, why? Well, in these times, just about all kids say it. But you guys understand what I'm talking about. A child also will accept the words of the one who really loves them. That's why children are often fooled by bad people. In this case, do you believe your Lord's words? Do you believe your Father's words? Are you willing to implement what he asked of you? You know what he asked of you? To love your neighbor as yourself. And no one who's alive can say, I don't love myself. He did. He said to love your neighbor as yourself. Who's your neighbor? Everybody but you. If you love your neighbor, you're not going to persecute. You know what? I see bad people all the time. Some of them should go to jail. But see, I have a problem. You know what the problem is? I do not like this spirit that's gotten hold of them. When I see a corrupt person, I see a person who's losing. Why? Because my eyes are open to spiritual things. I don't blame the person. I blame the spirit that got hold of the person. Because I have a desire to help people. The Lord has shown me the spirits behind these things, and they say and do the exact same things every time. There's so many phrases I hear every day of my life that spirits have said. I know it's not the person. I know it's the spirit. When you want the Lord's word to be the word in this earth, you have a strong desire for people to be free of the grip of Satan himself. When a person is in the grip of Satan, that's when they do evil. I ask you again, do you believe in what the Lord said? Because there are lots of people losing out there. That's why I never condemn people. Have you noticed? Have you guys noticed? I don't condemn people. Sometimes I get upset at the situation. Make no mistake. If God is allowing them to breathe, how is it that the Father has seen fit that they can live this very day, yet we can condemn them as though they have no right on this earth in this day? How can that be? We have a work to do. And it seems people are giving up. Too many are giving up. They cannot see the Lord's work anymore. Folks, this is a very different time. It deserves lots of explanations. I want you to know I'm committed to unfolding everything I can. My prayer is that you can consider, really consider, standing on the side of Christ in all, not some things, but all things. But be real and true about it. Never emulating somebody else. But ask that the Lord work with you directly. But please don't conform to the standards of this world. There's a reason your Father called you out of the world. There's a reason you didn't 100% fit in the world. It is the Lord's gospel. That's our lifeline. But it should also be, if we believe in it, it should also be the greatest motivation in our lives. The time we're entering into has grave consequences. Real darkness is on the way. There's only one way to stand in this time, and that is to stand by faith and by truth. And all that is summed up in Christ. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. To stand in him is to stand in those ways. So let's all encourage each other to do so, and remember something. Satan has a hold on a great many people. Please don't agree with him by condemning those he has captured. I'm against Satan. I don't know about you. I'm against him. I will never target who he has targeted. But I'll tell you this. If you see a rotten person out there, who gave you the eyes to see them in the first place? Don't see them by Satan's interpretation to condemn the person when God has not. Do you hear me? Your Father has not condemned them. If God opened your eyes to see that person totally compromised by darkness, evil, and Satan, why do you think he allowed you to see it? Qualify what's within you. I'm against the spirits that have hold of these people. But make no mistake, I have a strong desire that the people go free. Will not agree with Satan. I'll not become anybody's accuser. The judge is on his way, and there will be no mistrial, and no one is going to be late to what's coming. The Lord has not forgotten his people. So I'll leave you with this last prophecy. You ready? This is a biblical prophecy. In the last days, God's people will say, God has abandoned us. That's a marker for the last times. When people say within their hearts that God is not interested if I make it or not. And do you know what people are saying more and more? That's why depression is running rampant in the earth. Because believers are saying, I don't know if the Father's interested in my issue or not. Isn't that what we say when we get depressed? When we act like we're not going to be free from our situation? When it feels like we're not going to have the victory, isn't that what we're saying internally? This is it. Be candid with you, I do fear. These consequences coming, as heavy as they are going to catch too many off guard, and I'm praying you guys are not going to be caught off guard. If you're involved in the hatred the world is spewing, you will be caught off guard. You will protect no one. By the way, it's the Lord who said he would give people over to a strong delusion, that they would believe a lie, that they all might be damned, who loved not the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Do you hear me? Those who have pleasure in unrighteousness, God will give them over to a strong delusion, that they would believe a lie, for the purpose of their damnation. The Lord will do that. But right now, you're still under grace and mercy. Let's all ensure we make use of it, because the consequences are coming. The Lord's love towards you is evident even now. There's not much time left. Some have no time at all. Let us all encourage each other. Can we do that? I'm going to do my best to get you guys prepared as prepared as possible, but I have to warn you, it likely will not align with the entertainment stuff. Okay? It won't. Folks, I'm going to say God bless you. I got to go. I got to start getting into the walls. I pray that you guys will not be caught off guard. I pray that you won't be sucked back into the world again either. Stay the course. Help your fellow man stay the course. Encourage always. Time is incredibly short. God bless you. The Lord will keep you. Keep going. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow right here at COT, possibly in a few hours. We'll see. God bless you.